I'm Dr. Kathy Bush.
And hello, I'm Dr. Tara Peters, and we are the Leadership Doctors. And today we have with us a wonderful guest who's joined us today for a segment of Lessons from Leaders. We have Francess West with us, and we're excited to hear from her about her experience with technology, with accessibility. And so welcome, Francess.
Well, thank you.
We're so glad to have you. And so let's kind of open up the conversation today by you giving us a description of your leadership journey so our audience can better understand that in terms of your path.
Okay, thank you. First, thank you for the invitation. Really happy to be here today. My own leadership journey actually started in IBM way back actually in the late 80s, when I was in my early 30s. I first became a manager of a local branch operation and supporting a manufacturing and distribution account. From there, I moved on to a regional role, a management role, and then from there, I went into a national role, and then ended actually doing global leadership role for the last 20 some years before I retired from IBM in 2016. And now I have the a advisory services company of my own, and in this new company of my own, I actually do a lot of leadership coaching and do a lot of work with C-suites, board members, and also, and these tend to be in both large companies, nonprofit, government agencies like United Nations, and also startups.
Well, what an interesting journey you've had, and we don't often get to talk to people who've spent a large amount of their career in the same place, and so you've grown through the ranks at IBM, which is a really cool experience. I wonder, as you have been talking to either your former IBM colleagues or the many people that you're interacting with in your new advising company, what are people saying are the big challenges about kind of dealing with their life in this COVID-19 pandemic stage, their work life in particular? What are the big challenges that you're tuned into?
So like I mentioned, I worked when I was at IBM in a global, kind of had a global responsibility, and IBM certainly is a global company, with 300,000 plus employees operating in 170 plus countries. And so when you have a global pandemic like this, you can imagine the impact is profound. And of course, on the tactical level, everybody is thinking about how to make sure you can stay operational, right? And so the use of technology in this case, allowing our members, our workforce members, to be able to work from home, and making sure there's infrastructure that's both reliable and actually secure. It's very important. And fortunately, because a company like IBM, and also I've been in the technology business for a long time, we do have that infrastructure in place. And in time like this, it becomes extremely important. And I think at the strategic level, this particular crisis is a lot more complex. As you know, in addition to this healthcare kind of issues that we're dealing with and at global scale, we also have some geopolitical issues that one has to worry about or think about. So I think this probably posed most challenges than any other global events that we are aware of, and it really will test a company's, especially a global company's, ability to adapt and to be and actually responsible both to their clients, to the customers, and also to their employees.
Francess, as you were talking, I was thinking about, given the certain geopolitical challenges, the challenges around accessibility, the challenges operationally that organizations are facing. I mean, this pandemic is unlike anything that we've actually seen in our lifetimes. And so it presents its own set of unique opportunities, but also obviously, as you were talking about, there are challenges as well. So as you look back at on your own professional career with IBM, you were Chief Accessibility Officer there, so you have that C-suite strategic perspective, and also thinking about now your role with your consulting advisory company. I mean, what are some of the just, hallmark guiding principles, values that you think are important for leaders and that you think would be important to share relative to this time?
Sure. I mean, you mentioned accessibility, and maybe I'll take just a half a second to define what it is, because some of the audience may not be familiar with. So the term accessibility in the technology context is about digital access or digital inclusion. Similar to privacy and security, accessibility is trying to make sure that today everybody depends on technology, like your cell phone, is your technology. And also, for example, video conferencing, like what we're having, is the technology. How do you ensure a person who is aging or with a disability such as vision impairment or hearing impairment can have equal access, right? So these are the kind of challenges, just like, physical challenges. How do you move about, in a city? People use ramp or to allow people using wheelchair to go from point A to point B. As we build our society around technology, it's absolutely crucial that we think about how to build in access points so everybody, all people, and can have access. In some cases, the whole idea of accessibility is actually beyond just age and abilities. It also involves, for example, socioeconomic, disparities. So like like we talked about earlier, if you're in the countryside and no access to high bandwidth internet, then your access to, for example, e-learning, online learning, or conference call like this is going to be limited. So I think if I look back and also thinking about what the technology is building, I mean, it's causing, I think there's the speed of change has really accelerated due to technology. So for individual at work or at home, when you are dealing with a society that change is constant, I think as leaders, it's very important that you be able to have the capability to manage change, and in some cases, ideally, be able to predict or project what the change will come about, and then have the preparation. I think COVID-19 really taught us, when I say preparation, it doesn't necessarily mean physical, but mental preparation of always anticipating that there will be a situation we have never dealt before. I think we have gone beyond to the old days where, life is just about routine. It's going to be new norm every single day. So I think as a leader, be able to respond very intelligently and being prepared, and frankly, being very forthcoming about the situation we're dealing with, so that you can not only build, but you can depend on the trust you already established, with your team or with your customer or with your partners, over the years. Because we all know in time of crisis, the trust of leadership is probably the most important attributes.
Francess, as I was listening to you, I was thinking clearly some of these are principles that you've developed over time because of experiences that you've had, right? And much of the way that we learn how to do anything, and clearly leadership being one of those areas where much of what we learn by making some mistakes. Well, we bump into things along the way. And so I'm not asking you to share any of your mistakes in particular, but I'm really just curious on the big picture. And I'm thinking about the folks who are watching this maybe at an earlier stage in their career where they're planning for their leadership career. What are some of the things that you did do or would tell people to do intentionally to develop their leadership skills so they're ready for change and that they have the kind of human relation, emotional intelligence skills that you were just talking about?
I would say that literally either through conscious kind of a planning, or in my case, it was actually a bit of an accident that I get thrown into a situation I thought I had control, I thought I can manage, but it was completely different environment. And in this case, I can share a personal story. It was actually back in the early 1990s when China was just opening up. And my company, IBM at the time, knew that I'm first generation Chinese. I speak Chinese, I read Chinese, and that's my native language. So they asked me to go to Beijing, China to help IBM open up the financial services sector, meaning the banks, the insurance company, and Shanghai Stock Exchange. And I thought, sure, this be no problem. You know, this is my native country. You know, I speak the language. It's going to be, you know, a piece of cake. And I still remember as I was preparing for the assignment, I went out and bought some fancy clothes and thinking, you know, I'm just going to be looking good. And because the work is not going to be that much of a stress, I will be able to have time to really go out and have fun. And as it turned out, it probably was the most difficult challenge I have ever faced in my life, because I actually joined IBM right out of college. And what I didn't realize was that my whole business thinking, logic, you know, is completely, you can call it, you know, US centric or Americanized. And so here I am in a culture, even though it was my native culture, but from the business experience standpoint, it was completely foreign. And the hard part was the customer will relate to me because I can speak the language. And then I remember some of these senior executives will lean in, you know, and say to me, oh, you know, Manager Wong, you must know what we're talking about. And I would nod my head and say, sure, I know what you're talking about. But in the back of my mind, I have no clue what they're talking about. It was such a humbling experience that I always tell people when I mentor younger people is that, you know, if you have the opportunity, you really want to go for what I call the stretch assignments, you know. If you are, for example, left-brained person, right? Like a spreadsheet, like, you know, organizing everything, then take an assignment that's in strategy, which is very, you know, very supposedly kind of a right brain and kind of creative, and vice versa. Because if you don't push yourself to be in a completely uncomfortable environment, you won't appreciate, you know, other people's way of thinking. And also you won't develop the tools or the skills that can help you later on.
Well, Frances, you've given us so much to think about and so many great insights and just perspective that's really been all encompassing, from the accessibility to cultural elements to your own journey and giving wisdom along those lines as well. So we just want to thank you again for being a part of our Lessons from Leaders series. We want to let our viewers know that you can see more of videos just like Frances has shared today by going to our website, theleadershipdoctors.com.